No, everyone who's joining. So churros. Hey, hello everyone. Let's wait a little bit until others join us, and then we'll start. So let me know if I'm having any issues with the microphone or something like that. Maybe I'm lagging or just anything else. Just in case you notice or spot any issues, let me know. Now then. Okay, so I guess we can start. So hello everyone. Today today this session will be basically based on the on your basically on your questions, not the questions, but on your feedback when you mentioned that you don't really understand how can we actually connect JavaScript, the course you spend most time, yeah. So your basically your base course, JavaScript course, and SAP in general. So yeah, today we are going to speak about it. I will mention first of all about the not the main, but I would say um, maybe the most general usage of web development of JavaScript in SAP, at least from my experience. Uh, yeah, so this is what we will talk about, and in addition, we then will see how to use JavaScript in SAP Analytics Cloud. So we will talk about these things because in general, I mean, if you are working with all different kind of and just any kind of web development, any kind of designing, then it is most likely then you will need to use JavaScript, CSS, and also in some cases most likely you would need to use HTML as well. Yeah. But HTML nowadays it's maybe going a little bit on side um, since most layouts are automatized, are already the patterns are mostly created. So just on practice, we in lots of different cases we mostly use patterns, and then we just need to modify the behavior of any elements, behavior and also the style of some elements. And then in this case, of course, we must use JavaScript since we work with the web development and CSS to customize the styling of elements. So, and the first thing what we will talk about today is SAP UI5. Since this is maybe not 100% related to SAP Analytics Cloud. However, since we're talking about SAP, and if you work with SAP environment, then most likely at some point you will face UI5, and this is basically the general place where you can face JavaScript in SAP. But yeah, so let's talk about it. So first of all, just to speak about the motivation. Uh, so why basically do we need the web development? So I just mentioned JavaScript, that's mostly related to web development. And yeah, so when we talk about web development and we basically talk about the software applications, SAP is mostly about, since again we have the applications, we need to have the place where users can do the actions, where users can access the data, where users can do any actions, run the reports, and so on. So in this case, we primarily talk about the user interface and the user interface in general. So that's the point. That's the point at which human users interact with the computer, website, or application. So in our case, we talk about almost only we talk about the applications or web applications. Yeah, so in SAP we rarely, from my experience, I don't know if we can really talk about websites, but mostly we talk about the applications, just what you can install locally on your computer or just some kind of virtual machine, and the web applications. So that's the actual application which can be run in your browser. Yeah. So we need to have the place where the interaction can be done. So, and the goal of effective user interface is to make the user experience easy, and to require minimum effort on the user's part to receive maximum desired outcome. So yeah, that's by definition, and just in general, as you may understand, the user interface must be easy to make to do any actions there, yeah, to access data we want, and to make it easy to use it in general. And I mean, so just to achieve it, we stand many different layers should be created, and then based on these layers, we can do the interaction. Yeah, so what about the user interfaces in SAP system? Again, we previously talked about a lot of theory, but again, everything what is actually related with SAP systems, SAP applications on practice, these needs to be managed in using some kind of user interfaces, of course. Because without user interface, what we can do, basically nothing. Yeah, I mean, of course, we can have like really bad user interface where you can just simply need to press some let's say kind of ugly buttons. And just maybe load the files and then edit them locally or just in any uncomfortable way. So of course this is not what we want to have. And yeah, so in fact, so what are maybe not the problems, but the concerns for user interfaces in SAP systems, which may trigger some uncomfortable situations. So first of all, user interfaces are usually system dependent and do not reflect the data from different systems used in different business processes. So yeah, that's also the fact. As I said, if we have one system, then for this system we have user interface. We have another system, there we have like another interface. And like for many different systems, for many different applications, data sources, we have different user interfaces. So just in case we want to access them all at once, maybe some copy pasting should be done, or usually the case is that for one business process where we have user interactions, there are like maybe two or more systems used. Yeah, like in most, but in maybe quite popular cases, there are when we have like system on premise, that will be, for example, S/4HANA or just anything else, and then also some kind of, for example, Analytics Cloud or just other system. Yeah, or for example, also SAP ERP can be, and customer relationship management. So all these systems basically have one goal. There is the interaction with the user, and basically the actions should come from one place. But in fact, if we so in fact for different SAP systems, we usually have also different user interfaces. That's why I need to switch between them, and this may not be really user-friendly. And yeah, this is not really user-friendly in most cases. So, and yeah, so for lots of different SAP systems, you will find so-called SAP GUI, that's graphical user interface. That's the actual interface developed by SAP and used for different ERP systems. So just to access database, do some system setup, some server setup as well, and also the client managing some client settings, user settings, basically almost everything what can be done in the scope of one exact system. And then it is used for remote access, SAP Central Server in a company network. So as I said, I guess, if I remember last time, to access SAP SAP applications on premise. So Xamgu is mostly used for the applications on premise. Then we need to have our computer to make our computer connected to the network server, to the network where the server of the company is placed. And so that's the actual location of the server, and only after that we can have such connection. So as I said last time, how this can be achieved. So the easiest way, but so first way would be that you simply travel to the office where the server is located. Then you must just simply connect to the Wi-Fi of this place, yeah, in the place where this server is located. So it means that the server and your computer should be connected to the same network. Yeah, so you can just simply travel there and connect to the network. Of course, this is like you need to travel, so that's not how you can access it remotely. So to access the server remotely, I mean, the server where the actual application is stored, like SAP application on premise, I'm currently talking about. Then another option would be, as I also mentioned last time, that you uh, connect to VPN. Yeah, so there is usually such possibility provided by companies. Yeah, like I mean, that's mostly for the companies which provide SAP consultants, like also for example Accenture, or just such companies that provide provide the developers, provide the services for SAP development. Yeah, so then in such cases, it is most likely that you will have the option to connect to VPN. However, to the in the cases with in situations with real clients, we don't have such option. Because I mean that actually means that you would connect to the from any, like if you are external consultant, it means that external developer, it means that you are not located on site, so it means that you are not traveling to the customer, yeah, to the actual place where the customer is located, and then the network is used there. So again, as I said, if you travel there, then it's fine, you can simply connect to the Wi-Fi there. If you're working remotely, then most likely you won't be able to access the VPN of the customer, because that's usually not possible because of the security reasons. And that's why the only option you would have, and most you may have, is that you connect the remote desktop. Yeah, so you can use virtual machine, some kind of VMware, Amazon Workspace, Citrix, and so on. Yeah, so you can connect them, and then you will be connected to the actual computer, or some kind of representation of the computer which is located in the place where which is connected to this network, saying the server is connected, and from there then you will be able to access SAP applications. And also the last option, what I recently used in my current project, is that the customer simply sends the laptops to the consultants, and then we can simply access the SAP application. So in my case, I can access the application. Yeah, so as shown last time, I will access the application from my computer. I'm currently connected to the no, not connected to VPN, so I will connect my computer to VPN now, and then I will actually be able to connect it to VPN, and now I can log into the system. So I will log in just due to security reasons to not show maybe some things to know. Yeah, so currently I'm logging in, and now I'm in. Now I'm in, and this is SAP SAP logon. Yeah, SAP GUI. SAP GUI, and so this is you can see that's quite a little bit old-fashioned design. And so here I can access different programs and different applications. So for example, I can run some reports from here, which can do some operations on the data. Yeah, I can fetch the data, I can change the data. Yeah, so here you can just simply let me maybe test some code. Yeah, I don't have this code. Okay, maybe let me find some kind of code. Just a moment, let me search if I have any meaningful program. However, I guess I can type some kind of existing program. So for example, that would be just a program. So here is the code, and that's the standard code. Usually we have such thing that for the standard objects, I mean the objects created by SAP, they have a simple naming, like without any prefix. For custom objects, we usually have Z or Y prefix to just simply distinguish custom and generic objects. And from here I have the code which can do some actions. And basically, yeah, so I can run the program, there I can simply execute it, just providing the data, and then to read some kind of data. Here a transaction number, then I will get the results, and so on. And so currently I'm showing you this, so just for you to see how the, let's say, historic interfaces look like. And so here I have some data, I can check what I have here, and so on. And so these are just the reports to get the data. Yeah. So that is how the SAP-GUI interface look like. So I can do just I can manage some I can do some changes on the settings of the system here, do some customization to see how the data looks like, and so on. Yeah, so that is let's say, historical way how the data is represented in SAP systems. So here I'm showing SAP one. And yeah, so what's the case? Why do we need something else here? So first of all, that's quite old-fashioned, and maybe for nowadays not really user-friendly interface, because this interface is actually, if I'm not mistaken, introduced some kind of maybe. Actually, initially SAP is developed. Actually, this SAP systems are developed since 1970, but I guess maybe a little bit later. But anyway, this is a little bit old-fashioned user interface. Of course, nowadays users want something more modern, more easy, more user-friendly, and yeah, that's why SAP wanted to develop something new and to be able to work more flexible in a more flexible way. So yeah, actually the initial goal was to create such interface in 2009. So after that, basically, in that time there was the project to actually the goal of the project was to create the framework. And so just maybe before we continue talking there, so I'm not sure how much have you talked about JavaScript frameworks in a course with Vaults, but so as you may know, for different programming applications, there may be the frameworks. Yeah, the framework means that this is actually the set of kind of files. They can be like different files, typed differently, JavaScript files, XML files, and all the different types of files which are needed to actually build some kind of template framework of the application, which then can be used and customized by the developers. Yeah, so yeah, this is framework. There are different frameworks based on different languages. So there are JavaScript frameworks, TypeScript frameworks, like Vue.js. So that's yeah. So then PHP frameworks, also based on different languages, Java frameworks, and so on. So yeah, and also SAP wanted to create its own framework to then allow developers to create user-friendly application user interface for their systems. And the goal was to make this framework flexible. Yes, so it means that it can be used for many different types of the SAP applications. Yeah, also for different systems to make it extensible. So it means that, in fact, yeah, you'll see that in this UI5 framework, there are lots of different standard applications can be used to manage some data from on-premise systems, like for example S4HANA, and so for some human resource data, there are the applications which are already created and then can be used by the companies to then manage the data there. But yeah, so usually we want to extend such applications. We want to add more features, and that's why they should be flexible and extensible. Of course, modern to be up to date now, to be user friendly and so on. And yeah, so to provide consistent look and feel across SAP applications. So as I just said, there can be more than one system involved in one application. So it means that in fact, if we can simply build one application which has many different data sources and is practically based on different bases there. Yeah, and also the reason why there was the need to UI5 application framework is UI5 framework is that SAP's main UI framework was tightly coupled to its backend technology, becoming a bottleneck to UI improvements. Yeah, so yeah, this is this actually means that this SAP GUI, what I'm showing you here, that it's not really flexible to be changed and to be customized and also to be extended. And it's tightly coupled, and that's why it's not really possible to make any modifications there. And that's why we needed something else. And yeah, so for this purpose there was UI5 framework created. So this is JavaScript framework. What does it mean? Again, not sure if you work with any JavaScript framework as well. So if you did, please let me know. So, but JavaScript framework means that the main programming language there is JavaScript. Yeah, so it doesn't mean that everything is written in JavaScript. I will show you how the UI5 application looks like in practice. But it means that the most code actually and the base code is written based on not based on, but simply written in JavaScript. Yeah, there are different JavaScript classes, JavaScript objects, and of course we have we work with object-oriented model there. So I'm not sure how many, or if you talked about object-oriented programming. But yeah, so all these things and all the objects are managed, and all the actions are managed using JavaScript framework. Yeah, so this is true. However, one thing what also for you to understand is, since we talk about user interface, and here we have JavaScript framework, we mostly work on the web actions. So there are two things. There is the front end and there is the back end. So in UI5, that's the front end. That's the front end. That's the actual application what can be used by the users, and then there we only take the data from backend. So it means that we have some kind of requests sent to the actual backend system. So that can be system on premise, like again S4HANA or ERP or CRM or whatever it is, and then to get the data there and actually then fetch the data from there to the front end. Yeah, and then the data will be taken in UI5 application. Then the data can be processed by JavaScript, and then we can have some kind of outputs on the screen right then. So yeah, that is designed to build cross-platform applications. Yeah, that's open source, so it means that in fact, JavaScript framework can be available for everyone. You don't need the license to access the source code. There, actually, unfortunately, I cannot really show the real example of the application, since I have all these applications based on the company, and I'm not really sure if I can do it due to security reasons. That's why I will mostly show you the source code I developed, and also some maybe screenshots there. Yeah, so it's based on JavaScript, as I said. However, there is also the code of jQuery used, and yeah, also OS. So that's some kind of scripting. To be honest, I did not use it much, but yeah, so there is OS, and yeah, so it uses model view controller patterns. So basically, what it means that we have 3 steps. Again, please let me know if you talked about some kind of frameworks before, but usually frameworks have some kind of patterns. And so the pattern model view controller is pretty much popular. That is used, if I'm not mistaken, also in Android applications development, and in lots of different patterns. Again, it can be a little bit modified. There can be maybe more steps, but in most of the frameworks, first of all, we start with the model. So we define where is the data taken from, what kind of data types there are used. Again, since we are sending the data in between the backend and frontend, then we should expect what kind of data should be sent, what's the type of the data, if that's the structure, the table, the object, what basically we want to expect, and also from where we want to expect, what's the link, not really a link, but okay, yeah, link. We can say the link. The source, data source, we need to navigate basically how can we access the data source. So yeah, the path, yeah, the path to the data source should also be defined in model. I will show you it today as well. I'll show you today. Then the view. So the view is actually the file where you define the layout. So so as you know, you already work with HTML. So in HTML, we mostly define the views. So we have the tags, we have the layouts there, the tables, the different classes, the buttons, and so on, and fields, and all these things. Yeah, so this is what is mostly defined to view. I mean, all the layouts, all the buttons, all the tables, and so on. But one difference comparing to the standard approach, it is possible to define the views not only in HTML, using HTML, but also using X, if I'm mistaken, it's called HTML, XML files, yeah, actually using XMLs there. So yeah, and then it is basically parsed, and of course at the end on the browser level, of course we always will have HTML, but the initial definition can be done using the XML, for example. And then the controller is actually the class. Yeah, so the controllers, there are many controllers which are the classes which define the behavior of different views, also different objects, maybe sub-objects. And so this is all done using the controllers. Then there is the data binding. So it means that actually, so data binding usually means that we bind the data from one place to another. So we connect the data, we but we define the structure and the path to the linkage in between two different data sources, and then we simply, and then it is defined, and then we can use it. And yeah, it also uses UI5 element library. I will also mention about this library today. And yeah, we'll see what is it. Yeah, so about the UI5 element library. Yeah, so since we talk about JavaScript framework, it means that we should also be able to use something, and of course we can use standard HTML JavaScript objects we can use, but in addition there are different classes available, JavaScript classes available, which for example can define the button, the pop-ups, and lots of such different toolbars and so on, which can be defined by UI5 elements, which are defined as the classes. So we can then simply use them after that. Yes, so that's the point here. And yeah, so what are the key features? Yeah, first, there's the powerful development concepts. Yeah, so we can develop lots of different things. There we have the control of almost everything. So there's the rich UI controls. So consistent user experience, responsive across browsers and devices, and also enterprise readiness. So we can easily access all the elements there, and then also it's quite easy to then develop it for multi-platforms. So it means that it's not just like if you simply work without framework at all, or if you use the framework just which do not have the option to do not have the option to do the scaling automatically. I mean, like if you have the application, if you run the application, web application in your browser, or if you run it in your on your smartphone, or just any tablet, or just any device, then sometimes you may see the issues that the scaling is different on some devices. The interface is not user friendly, and so on. So in such cases, that may be the problem. However, with UI5 application, everything is pretty much aligned well, and then you should not really be worried about on which device, with what resolution your web application is running. However, one thing what I want to mention, and I guess Waltz maybe also talked about it, that nowadays we normally try to escape using Internet Explorer, and we also suggest the users to not do it. And basically, also from in my company, there is like the notifications coming, like for example, not for example, but so some kind of like once per 2 months that we should not use Internet Explorer at all. Instead, due to security reasons and just basically because it does not support lots of different things available in all the nowadays browsers. Yeah, so that's why. So if we talk about user friendly, then please do not use Internet Explorer, since you may face different issues there. So please do not use Internet Explorer. It has also it has some issues with UI5 applications, and it's not only with UI5 applications, but with lots of different applications. So we try to escape using Internet Explorer at all. Yeah, so then SAP UI5 uses lots of different open standards like HTML5, JavaScript, CSS, also OS for styling, Ajax, Data.js, just jQuery, and lots of other different things there. So regarding the building blocks, yeah, first there are two things. There is SAP UI5 and also UI5. So in general, we can now see what are the differences between them. Of course, they all have core. The core comes from the virtual machines, jQuery plugins, devices, message handling console, routing. Then you, of course, can also have table layouts, some common SAP M elements. I will show you what these elements are. However, also if we talk about SAP UI5 in general, there are some additional controls available. For example, that's also ABAP server. And so ABAP, that's Advanced Application Programming. This is what basically you can see I'm recently showing you here. So that's just for you to know. Maybe you will face it at some point if you work with the SAP application, SAP application on premise. So in this case, that's CRM. Actually, S4HANA looks and ERP looks, they look quite similar. That's just for your information. That's SAP ABAP, Advanced Business Application Programming, and lots of SAP on-premise applications actually are written mostly in using this language. So just for you to know, language is, I would say, yeah, just a small remark. The language is, I would say, it's not really complicated. It's quite different for comparing to what you can see in standard languages like in C++, Java, JavaScript, C#, and so on. It actually has all the main concepts what you can face in C++. Some concepts what you cannot see in Java. Some concepts from JavaScript cannot be used here, because JavaScript itself, it's a scripting language, so it has, comparing to backend languages, like again, if it's Java or C++ or something like that, C#, then of course JavaScript is a little bit different. It's mostly functional, not functional language, it's object-oriented language, but actually the functions there are used also as the objects, and yeah, it's mostly related to the event handling and lots of such different things, comparing to the backend language, which is actually static language. And so it's also static language, that's the backend language, and it is mostly needed to work with the database tables, so with some kind of internal data stored on on-premise system. Yeah, so basically, mostly it means that when you have UI5 application, So it means that the code there from the UI5 will actually call the call maybe OData service as an example, and then this OData service will trigger ABAP classes, and there will be ABAP code, which then fetches the data from backend. It also updates the data if needed, and so on. Yeah. So basically, the request comes to ABAP code, and ABAP code does the actions after that. So this is what it's about. Yeah, of course, for the difference is that UI5 itself, that's open source. Yeah, so there's kind of better releases. You can find lots of different code examples in GitHub. Yeah, in Stack Overflow, you may find lots of different useful things there. Comparing to SAP UI5 in general, so that's licensed by SAP, so it's not open source. There is, of course, ABAP server there, and yeah, of course that's licensed. It has the license. It has all the support from SAP and so on. So that is actually something different. But yeah, so that's actually SAP actually has all the main hope you can still hear me. All the main features what you can face in UI5, plus additionally you will have the option to, not the option, but the availability for the whole system in general. Okay, so that's just the standard version there. And yeah, so in general, again, I'm not sure, but most likely then in your JavaScript course you may hear something about bootstrapping. So that's the actual way how to manage the styling of your code there, of your web code. I mean HTML code. It's just to how to manage the HTML elements on your screen, on your application there. So there are different standard classes used by JavaScript, but by Bootstrap to then create acceptable and user-friendly layouts there. So it can be done using Bootstrap. Again, not sure if you talk about, but that's quite popular CSS framework, and basically, yes, from my experience, almost all the applications, web applications, and also websites use it. Yeah, to define the columns, to define the user-friendly layouts, and yeah, to basically to make the work with the web development easier. And yeah, so regarding UI5, so SAP UI5 script initializes SAP UI5 item automatically as soon as the script is loaded and executed by the browser. Yeah, so for UI5 applications, you will see that that Bootstrap is available there, and you can use it. However, in addition, there are some special SAP JavaScript classes, so you can also use them there, and there is a specific logic what can be then defined there, what can be then used using them. Yeah, so that would be that there's the script source, so there's JavaScript file, UI5 core file, which then to be used in runtime. Yeah. Then the default theme, what you can use, that's more Crystal. So you may see also for for Analytics Cloud, that there is, I guess that's Blue Crystal as well, so that's kind of standard theme used by SAP applications. And then of course there are additional requested control libraries, SAP yeah, we will see them a little bit later, what will automatically be used there. And usually we call such applications SAP Fiori apps. So that's these are the applications actually run using UI5 frameworks, and basically they're built based on UI5 frameworks. So, and there are different sections there. So the first section is SAP UI5 elements. So what do? They actually, so these are UI5 controls like menu, carousels, panels, toolbars, icons, icon tab bars, layouts, and so on. So basically using them you can just put the exact elements into your application. And so then you can use different view formats. As I said, primary we use XML, but then it is rendered into the HTML. Also, in some cases, it is possible to define just direct HTML code. And then, of course, JavaScript is used there, and JSON. So JSON mostly needed for the data exchanging, then in between the resources. And of course, then we have data binding, all data. That's the style how we can exchange the data in between the front end and the back end. So usually with the on-premise systems, and then JSON to then define the structure. Yeah, we define the structure using JSON, and then we usually also send the corresponding JSON data files to backend, then to basically exchange the information, and also then we get the information back from the backend, also using JSON file then. And yeah, XML also we define the layouts, the structures, and the actual models. And yeah, also we use I18 files. So I'm not sure if you again talked about it with robots, but in web frameworks we usually use I18 files. So if you see I18, most likely it means that this is the translation file where you can see the mapping between the IDs and the texts. Yeah, so usually it can be the ID of the element used in the front end, and then there will be the translation provided in another language. It can also be the you have the ID of the element, and then you can simply fill in the text in English as well. Yeah. So that is possible, and of course in other languages as well. So what are the advantages of UI5? So that's enterprise grade. So OpenUI5 follows all the open standards, and we have all the necessary development concepts, the tools needed to create our applications. I will show them a little bit later today. So then it's responsive on all devices. So as I said, we mostly don't need to care about the actual specification of the device, because again, maybe you also talked about it with Vaults, since for web developers there's usually a big concern of how the application will work on the corresponding device. So for UI5 we usually don't have such concerns. And yeah, it's also free and open source, so you can basically find all the code needed and access, check all the needed code and access all the code used just simply in your browser. Yeah, not sure if I can really show you how we can do it, because due to the privacy reasons, but yeah, it can be done. I can explain you maybe a little bit later as well. So So yeah, and then of course we need to have the connection in between the front end and the back end. In fact, the application can be stored on premise as well. So it means that again we have backend and front end. However, in fact, everything is located on one server, and the result, also the backend code and the front end code, everything is located on one server, and yeah. So then the connection basically works in the way that so you first have the IDE, so that can be Visual Studio Code, or for UI5 applications, we mostly use SAP Business Application Studio. Previously, we used Web IDE. So Web IDE is actually, unfortunately, nowadays is not really. I guess it's now abandoned. At least from my recent experience, I was not able to access Web IDE anymore. So currently, we use Business Application Studio uh, to 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 code to code in UI5 applications. And then we have IDE, we have the source code where we can actually access all the code we need to do all the changes we need, and then we can and then we deploy the changes to the actual server where our web application is stored. Yeah, so we publish the app actually, and then we can access backend system. So there's the database can be used, so the gateway, and it should normally be done using Cloud Connector. Yeah. So then we actually need to exchange. But again, everything what we developed is it is done using IDE, and then the UI5 code is run on the web server. However, again, in my experience, it's basically one system, but in fact, I guess we can use one server. So basically, it means that again, the set backend code and web server are located on one server. Yeah. But yeah, they still need to be connection established in between them. Yeah, so usually it means that we have the web application, then we send the request goes to the backend, so it goes to the database, or the server which can access the database, and then the response is sent back using JSON or XML. So yeah, regarding data connections, all presentation, so that's how it happens. All presentation logic is done on the client. So if for SAP system, SAP applications on premise, we have the clients. So that actually means that for one system, for our one actual system, so in this case that's the system called CM3, so that's one exact system stored on the server, we may have different clients. So it's client 100, sometimes we can have like different clients, basically simply defined for one system there. And what's the point here? The point is for different clients, we may have basically the system is the same. I mean, you will have the same code, the same logic, also the same applications there, and all the same things. However, for different clients, the only difference is that you have different data. So it means that the actual user data, the different business partners, different products defined, different transactions, then and so on. Yeah. So basically, it means that you have like simply one definition of the systems with different data, yeah, and different data is then stored on different clients then. And yeah, so all the presentation logic is done on the client. Only resources are ordered from web server. Yeah, so the resources are ordered then, and then from there we can access the data by sending the request there. Yeah, then the JavaScript is single-threaded, so there's only one JavaScript thread per window. Unfortunately, I cannot really show to you, but when you go to I'm not sure, have you worked with inspect element or not, but on inspect element you can actually access some data files publicly available there, and when you go to inspect element on the so that would be inspect element. So on inspect element, then if you go to the sources, then from here, so I cannot, unfortunately, cannot really show you how this would look in UI5 application case, but then you can actually navigate to see the actual source code of your web applications. Yeah, in fact, in addition, so regarding this case, again, I'm not sure if you talked about, but for JavaScript code on the website, we sometimes may have simplified version. It's called minimized version of JavaScript code. It simply means that it is actual JavaScript code which is simplified, which does not use extra spaces. So it means that it is simply, as I have the example, let me, I'm not sure if I have the example, let me maybe quickly check. Yeah, so for example, this is simplified version, so it means that the variables do not have the long names, yeah, how we would define them. Like if in normal code we define the simple variables there, I mean with the normal, so here we have variables with the understandable names there. Yeah, so then in the minified version they will be just simply named as something like E and O and so on. Yeah, so there are no extra spaces, no extra, just extra stuff, don't, which is not actually needed for the JavaScript file to be executed. Yeah, so in some cases when you talk about source code, which can be found for UI5 applications, then you instead of the actual, not the actual code, but the code actually written, you may see the minified version of it. But yeah, that's single-threaded, so it's loaded on the application, on the browser, and then during the work with the application, UI5 application, this file is then rendered there and available under the resource. Yeah, and data is loaded using XHR requests. So then it means that when you run the UI5 application, then there may be the request to backend, and also from backend, which exchange the data using OData services or REST-based service. Actually, in my experience, I mostly work with OData services, and so that's the actual service which allow us to simply send the data to and from the backend system from UI5 application. And it's usually supplied using JSON and XML format at the end. Yeah, and okay, maybe right now we can have 10 minutes break, and after that we will then continue talking about UI5. Okay, so so yeah, let's continue. And so the first of all, what we can talk about when we start developing UI5 application, that's UI5 control. So that's in fact user interface element which is composed by API. So the metadata, properties, aggregations, and events, and the behavior, which is actually the internal event handling, the render, and the markup operation, and the CSS. So that's in fact these in fact can be considered as some kind of objects, but I mean not in objects in a classical way of representation, but the objects as what we can see on the front side, on the UI5 side, on the application side. So yeah, they can be used and they can be then included into the application. So UI5 controls are the built-in offering UI5 frameworks to then write UI5 elements, and these elements can then be accessed as an object in JavaScript code. Okay, so and then you can fetch the data and also change the data if needed. So this is open source, and UI5, OpenUI5 it's an application, so you can go to the documentation, and actually for lots of different, not lots of different, but for UI5 applications, you can find pretty much understandable documentation. So from here you can find lots of different tools, lots of different elements actually used in UI5 applications. So for example, I want to search for the button. So here you can simply see how can I add the button, how can I extend the button. So here you can see actually the documentation for some tutorials, how to proceed with creation. So you can see all the steps there. So you can see JavaScript code to then develop corresponding, for example, power button. So this is what I said about CPM elements. So these are actually the classes. So JavaScript classes, what you can use, and then from them you can use extend method to define the extension elements there. So this is JavaScript code, which then can be used, and so based on that you can access the code there. And yeah, for the actual elements, you can go to API reference, and from here you can search for the button, and here you can find different kind of button can be used. As for example, I want to use menu button, so that is the element we can include in our view. So then we have the application, then we include the element, and then for the elements we have the parameters, what we can, so just simply as for all the parameters in HTML, you can add the properties to them, so the same as here, but instead of HTML elements, we use special UI5 elements, which I will show you how they can be used. And then for these elements, you have the type, you have default values, and then you can maintain it from the configuration. Also the properties, and that's what I said. The events, so these are the events which can be called from these elements. When you define the element, then you can call them, then there can be the events, so like the default actions. Also for some button, for the buttons it should be on click event, on click, that's press event. So simply the same as in HTML, you have on click event, then it handles the logic which is triggered when you press some button. So the same is here. So press, and then other methods which can be, so the methods, these are the methods which are actually called from JavaScript code. So when you access the corresponding elements from the view, then you can, like in this case, if you access the element defined as button, then you can call the method, the corresponding methods from it, and then to get some results. So for example, you can file press, so that means that the events, the listeners registered on quick will be triggered. So for example, else get icon, get enabled, you have to check if button can be enabled or disabled. Then also get text, yeah, if there's the text in the button set visible, there should be, that should be inherited, yeah, because all the elements can be set as visible or invisible. So it means that the visibility is true. That if you set visibility true, then it means that the element will be displayed, or you set visibility false, then element will not be displayed, and so on. Okay. So yeah, these are the elements, and I will show you where you can actually define them after that. Yeah, I will show you an actual example of the application, and then you will see these elements there. And in addition, you can also use SAP UI5 web components. So these are based on the web standards around web components. So the framework itself is actually independent. Framework independent UI elements are implemented in accordance to Fiori design guidelines, incorporate with SAP Fiori design, and they ensure visual and behavior consistency for static web sites and web applications. So web components is something what is a little bit different from the actual UI5 elements, but you can check them here. So these components can be used in a similar way, but it is, they are a little bit different. But mostly for UI5 applications, we can refer to the simple UI5, open UI5 elements. Yeah, so what's the difference between UI5 controls and UI5 web components? So they are built independent. Web components are built independent from UI5 framework. Compared to UI5 controls, the footprint of UI5 web components is smaller. So because they are independent in the application model. And yeah, UI5 web components are not. Yeah, so it means that UI5 web components are apart from UI5 controls. And yeah, they enable you to see UI elements with HTML-based features. So yeah, so now let me show you how the UI5 application may look like. So I've taken the real example I developed. So yeah, what we have here. So first of all, can we start as for, I'm not sure if you worked with web applications before or not, but for them we mostly start with one base folder, and inside this folder we have different subfolders meant for different topics, and plus we have some basic definitions needed for our web applications. So let's maybe start. So first of all, we have the binding between the services. Originally, I mean, in this case, I developed it in Visual Studio. On practice, it will be Business Application Studio, which has a little bit different functionality, and it's maybe more powerful. But for some reasons, not right now, I need to use Visual Studio. And here I actually work with with the source files of the application there. And I mean, almost all of the files, JavaScript files, are do have a minified version. So it's DBG, which is a standard version, and there is one moment. I need to moment. Yeah, so there is the version what we actually write, and then there is minified version for all the JavaScript code there. When it is minified, when you work on Business Application Studio, then there are usually there are some generic tools, JavaScript tools, what JavaScript commands, what can actually be, not JavaScript commands, but the commands based on JavaScript definitions. Then we can actually run them from console, and then the files will be minified. Yeah, so then for all the files we have, so the service binding actually is needed for additional modules there. Yeah, so for there we have simply one JavaScript method, and then we call the fetching of the corresponding model, yeah, which is in our case based on OData. It is OData model, so it calls the backend server using Pluralsight. So it means that our application is already connected to the to our on-premise server, and then here we provide the path, and then we get the model after that. And yeah, then the core is loaded, and then the model is set there. But yeah, so that's maybe not so important for us. What I want to point your attention that we have, so during the during the usage of the program, you will see that there are JavaScript classes, as I said, and these are basically taken from UI5 library, which then can be used here, and then the classes there can be called. Yeah. So yeah, then we have JSON file where we actually we define some definitions for our application, the resources from where we get the resources of the actual files used here. So basically here I define all the files which are used by the application. So this debug, to be honest, I did not use this parameter. So simply the name of the file, yeah, the path to the file, where it is, and basically nothing really more for the resources JSON. And the key file, what is here is manifest file. So manifest JSON file, that's let's say some kind of core file, you know, for this application, which defines all the main elements there. And so that's the idea of the application, actually the path to the translation files, the description of the application, the data sources. And so these are the actual data sources used for the application. Yeah, so that this is one application is fully located in this folder. Yeah, so then we have data sources, what we can actually use for our application. These are, so we define a path, then we can access the system on premise. So this is all data. So is actually, in fact, we can simply access the link. Then this will fetch me the data from, so it means that I simply can type the link in browser with support specific prefix for my application, and then I simply paste this part, and then I get the data from the backend there. And so about the cross navigation. I did not really use it, but oh no, that's for some functions, for some methods, what I can call from the backend. Then yeah, UI5 definition. Here we actually define what's yeah, we do not define the version, but that's just general technology. The theme, what we use, UI5. Yeah, and under UI5 we define also the main properties there. What's the root view from where we start our application? What are the dependencies? What are used, also the versions of them, because for UI5 application this is quite quite crucial. What's the version we use? Because for some versions some things may not really work, and then the update is requested, is needed. Yeah, then there are also the models. The models what are used for the actual resources what we can get during the execution of, not during the execution, but during the usage of our program. So when we have models, it simply means that this is these are all the main data sources what can be used by us in the program. So here I have like all the main sources I can actually get. I can actually use them. For the setting, so these are actually the all data services what can be called from backend. So I simply have the mapping what I will use inside the code, and here I have the mapping to the data source I defined here, which is then used inside which is then defined inside the controller. Yeah. Not only sorry, not under the controller, but under the that was not the resources, not the controller, but local server. Yeah. So on the local service, corresponding metadata is defined, and then we can access it using these definitions. So resources, also CSS styles are used. Moment. CSS styles are used. Then the routing. So again, not sure if you had any experience with routing in web development before, but for routing, it usually means that we have some kind of redirection based on different links. So sometimes this redirection comes directly from what we call, and also sometimes something may be called by some generic logic and program. So there we want to redirect this logic to some place, and then the routing is needed after that, needed for this. And so the routing is there. We define the routes from where to where we navigate, and so the path, the attributes used for the corresponding routes, and so on. Okay. So also it means that, like for example, if I define the link, and this is then pattern, then it usually navigates to the view where this pattern is used. Okay? So in this case, that would be I provide a link to my UI5 application, then I pass the pattern KP entry set, I pass the unique ID, and I also pass the ID of the approver, and then I will get the corresponding entry with these parameters provided then. Yeah, also the targets are there, but yeah, simply the main definitions are placed here. And again, as you can see, this is JSON file. Again, not sure if you work with JSON files before, but they have a similar syntax as JavaScript code does and JavaScript objects do, and simply they simply are defined as JavaScript objects. Yeah. So yeah, this is the root here, component GS. That is the main component used for the application. To be honest, I did not really code much here, so that's just for the general definition. Some cases may some actions may be defined here, but that's maybe not so crucial. The most important things are defined for the views. So, and here we have the actual definition for the view. For the view and for the fragments, view fragments used for the actual pages. So, for example, okay, this is actually maybe not so interesting. Let's maybe take a look on the object view. So, and here we actually have something similar. What I mean, not of course from the syntax point of view, this is totally not similar to what you may see in HTML, but that is actually XML. XML, which then, as I said before, is rendered to the actual HTML file after that. HTML file after that HTML code, and then it is then shown on website on your web browser. So, and here we have the main syntax. We have the definitions, some different definitions to actually have the layout we want to have. So for the core, yeah, that's for most will be UI5 core, and then some elements to define the layout, yeah, like what should be placed in footer. So the actual layout, and so the structure of the view then, and yeah, then after that you have the elements, similar elements as what you may have in HTML. And starting tag, there should be starting tag and closing tag. So again, not sure if you talked about the differences between HTML files and XML files, but in HTML, for some, as you may know, in HTML, for some tags, they may be not closing. I mean, you can skip using closing tags and you won't have any errors, issues there. Comparing to XML files, where you must close all the opening tags. Yeah, so if the tag is opened, you must close it in HTML, or sorry, in XML. Comparing to what you have in HTML, when you don't need to. Sometimes you don't need to close the opening tag. So yeah, then you have structures. There are subtags, so the header tag, the header elements. Also, you set the parameters of the element. Like in this case, that's yeah. So here we define object header, and again, just to compare. One moment. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, then we can paste it into the UI5 documentation. Hold on. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, we can pass it here, and here we have this object. So let's maybe make the double screen here, and so we have this object header, and here I can see basically what are the parameters it may have. So again, same as for HTML tags, here you can also check what you can fill in there. Yeah, so I can show borrowed, means that's something what is taken from the let's say some kind of super class, super objects there. And yeah, so for example, here I have number unit and number. So I guess they should be here. Oh, here. Number unit. Yeah, so number unit is defined here as parameter, so it means that we can use it. And here you can also find the description of this parameter and what is the type of it. Yeah, the same is for other objects. You can simply find them from here and then use them as as your elements in these XML views after that. Yeah, also you can define the classes. The classes are the CSS classes. So here we have editable form, I guess. This is what I defined. Sorry, not what I defined here, but actually then we can also use the classes defined in CSS. So under CSS you have the styles, and you can include these styles and use them for your elements. Yeah, so the styles work same way as they work almost everywhere. Yeah, I hope that you may already worked with styles in your JavaScript course. So then here you can also define CSS styles and then apply them to the elements in the views you define. Yeah, then basically all the same parameters there. Yeah, so just in case you have any questions, let me know. And yeah, this is how the view is defined. In addition, what you can see here, you can see that we have some including values. Yeah, so we have curly brackets and then the values, and basically these are the values taken from the data source. You know, we define in manifest. So in that case, I guess that should be this data source. Do we have the data sources? I mean, not these data sources, but all data sources. To a moment. Yeah, yes, here we have them. Yeah, so from this data source we have metadata, and then it will actually then be available here. So we have object view XML here. Object. Oh, sorry, not here. Defined. Element. Yeah, so I have object view here. Then yeah, it is assigned to the corresponding AllData, the AllData structure, and then the structure can simply be used from here. So it means that once we load this view, they will be AllData loaded, and then these values are actually taken from the AllData that we received from backend. Yeah. So yeah, this is how it is done. Yeah, so values can be taken there and simply used. Yeah. So yeah. Here we can basically make them dynamic, and also for to make them busy. Or I mean, busy. It means that the element is loading. Yeah. So I'm not sure if we talked about it in JavaScript, but JavaScript course, but yeah, you'll definitely face it at some point. So yeah, and this can be done for different use. So yeah, this is how we define use, similar way as for HTML, but with some specific differences here. And yeah, that's the view part. And for the views, we usually have the controllers. And yeah, mostly for every view we assign the controllers. So one moment, let me get to the models. Oh, sorry, not the models. Yeah. So for view we have the controllers assigned, and then for example, just create entry. So this is controller then assigned for create entry view, and here I have JavaScript code which provides me the base definition. So first of all, what do we have here? We have some functions which are defined by default. Actually, controller extends the base class. Yeah, so there is the base class, and then actually our code extends the code from there. And yeah, so what do we have? We have some, yeah, also, first of all, again, when we talk about JavaScript, it means that we mostly talk about some kind of data listeners, not action listeners, and not data listeners, but action listeners. So it means that some kind of button trigger is pressed, and then the code is executed, then the view is initialized, then some code is executed, and so on. Yeah, so here it has onInit method, so same as in HTML views. So there it is triggered when the view is loaded. So, and from here I can actually access the elements loaded in this view. So one point what you can do, actually, again, I'm not sure if you already worked with inspect element, but so if you work with inspect element, so Ctrl J, Ctrl I, Ctrl Shift I, or Ctrl Shift I. Then here you have inspect element, and so when your application is loaded, in this case that's not UI5 application, but for your web application, you can simply repeat all the code what you can see here. I'm not sure if you already did it in your JavaScript course. I mean, worked something similar in JavaScript course, but yeah. So in inspect element, you can access the current objects what you have here, and from here you can access some data. I mean, that's not simply when you have code in console, but when you do the debugging, for example, so you open so that in UI5 case, that would be like you open this file, or there is another option, as I mentioned, the controllers defined with the minified code. In addition, what you can see in UI5 applications is that you will have component preload. So it basically means that all these files, yeah, including the translations, the styling, not sure about the stylings, maybe the stylings are skipped, but all the JavaScript files or the views are simply combined in one component preload file. So it means that in fact your application is simply loaded from one file and all the code is executed there. Yeah? So it means that you will here have the component preload file, JavaScript file, which has all these elements from here, all the code from here, and then it is executed, and then all the code are placed here. So then you can debug. I'm not sure if you debugged, if you already debugged JavaScript code. So just let me know if you did. So then when you debug the code, you put the breakpoint there, and then once, for example, on init, if you put the breakpoint in the code in the method on init, then once you load your screen, the program will actually be stopped, and then you can debug the code there. In addition, you can go to console there. So during the debugging, you can go to console and just simply type all the code you can see here. This will work. Yeah. So that would be, again, in this case, this won't work because I have not loaded UI5 application. But so it means that I can just simply then run the same code. Yeah, in this case, I don't have this function, but on UI5 application, this function will be there, and I can just simply then the code I write in backend, not in backend, the code I write in my IDE, I can then simply call the same code in console there. Okay. This is what we can do for all kind of UI5 applications. Yeah, so let me know if you have any questions. about it. Yeah, so that's JavaScript framework. It has the code based on JavaScript. So then you can define some handlers. Yeah, for example, the create entry. So there is save button. And so save button, handler on save defined here. So it means that when I press save, then on save event, yeah, we call an event, that's the method, and is triggered after that. Yeah. So and yeah, from here we can do the logic, and what most likely what will we do? We will actually send the data to backend and also maybe request the data from backend. So this is what is done like in this case. Yeah, so that changes. Yeah, so this actually, so the model is connected, is created based on the resources we have in the backend system, and this data can be used after that. Yeah, so and the same for other. We can simply define any method we want here. We can define any event, any triggered event there, and then access our application. So during the execution of all these events, you will be able to access all the models defined. So it means that you can request all the data needed. So you're already signed in. So then it means that you will get the data there. So yeah, this is what we have, and yeah, this is JavaScript framework. This is basically where in SAP you can use JavaScript. I mean, not only here, practically in also in on-premise systems. So even for old-fashioned web applications, you will see that at least at some point HTML and JavaScript will definitely be used. Yeah, so this is what we have to. Maybe you have any questions, please let me know. Yeah, so basically it means that almost all the SAP applications can be integrated with, not can be integrated, but can be then represented on in UI5 application, and then you can connect your UI5 application with the data, backend data, and then use it from there. Yeah, that's valid for many different applications, and the thing is that from here you can actually access multiple systems, and in normal way you can then simply combine the access to multiple systems into one here. Again, UI5 applications, these are simply the applications, yeah, they are front-end applications, so they do not have any data here. Yeah, you can see that I don't have any data. I have the models which allow me to, yeah, so I have the manifest file where I have the model which simply provides me the connection to the resource, to the data in the backend, so I can read this data and then use it in front end after that. So yeah, this is how it is done. Yeah, this is the example, and maybe I can also quickly then show some screenshots. Again, unfortunately, I cannot show you the real UI5 application. Yeah, so I will maybe try to, yeah, so you can build something like this. Yeah, so it means that you will have so that's yeah, so it means you have the views. Yeah, usually the applications are pretty much similar. So this this is the general view. You have tabs there, and then in fact, yeah. So in general, you will have one general view, which then from there you can access to different applications. Yeah. So in this case, it is most likely. I'm not sure how this example looks like, but works. But usually it means that these are different applications, so each of them is considered as different UI5 application. And yeah, one more thing what I wanted to share with you from the documentation point of view. So here you can also, in addition to simple definitions, you can find lots of samples. So here you can find the samples again. I can, for example, navigate to button, menu button, and then I can go to the sample and see how the button is used. Yeah, so here I have the example of how the buttons are defined, and in addition to this, I can see the source code here. Yeah, I can download. Okay, here is the source code. Here is the source code, which is lagging for some reasons. Okay, come on. Okay, so and here you can see the source code for this. Yeah, so actually what we see here. Yeah, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buttons. Here you can see how they look like. Yeah, how do they look like? How do they act? And then I can go to source code and simply see how these buttons are defined. Yeah, so here, as I said, we have this main object menu button, we have the text here, and we have menu items, which are basically drop-down items. Like in HTML, that would be select and the options for selections. Yeah, so here we have the main object and the items of these objects. So these are drop-down elements. So you can simply check how they are defined. How do they work? So how can we use them and so on? And what are the properties? Then so simply you can copy paste the elements from here and use them in your XML view. In addition, you can find the definition of manifest. So here you can see the elements which may be needed for your manifest file and the controller of this view itself. Again, as I said, we have the pattern model controller and view model controller here, model controller view, and this is what we have. Yeah, manifest defines the main model. Then we have the view which defines the actual layout for the view, and we have JS JavaScript, which is JavaScript controller file, which is actually the controller of this view. Yeah, so here we have the actions. Yeah, so first we start with the return of controller, which extends the menu button MB class, and from here we have the actions, which are done when we, which are basically done when we do some actions. So for example, on default action, that's, I guess, as I understand, that's the default. Oh no, sorry, yeah, that's the default action. What we have here, so that's the handler. That's the handler. So on press event, basically what happens when you press on the button. On menu action, so when we press on menu, again, so when we press on menu, it does, you see here, and yeah, so here is simply the logic there. Yeah, so this is what you can find for many different elements. So again, it's quite developer friendly. Yeah, so you can find samples, and there you can find JavaScript code. so everything what may be needed. That's enough to maybe not what we simply need, so maybe I will then skip it. Yeah, and for lots of different other elements, you can find the way how can we use them. Yeah, so that is the definition, and let me again check some UI5 elements. How can they look like? Yeah, usually you'll see that UI5 applications are used, are defined as Fiori. So yeah, maybe one thing what you can see, and this is what I said from where we usually start. That's SAP GUI interface, graphical user interface, and comparing to this, we have SAP Fiori interface, which is again more user-friendly and more modern, and it's easier to access because again for SAP GUI you need to actually launch it on the separate application. And in addition, from my experience, I guess I don't really know how we can normally access it for access it from Mac OS system. Yeah, that's actually only Windows friendly from my experience. So then there we have the problem, but for SAP Fiori applications, we can simply access them from browser. But again, the same as for GUI interface, we need to be connected to the VPN, to the network where the server is located. Yeah, so that may be that's the usual case what we need to consider there. Yeah, so this is, and yeah, based on using UI5 applications, you can simply define whatever you want. You can also define you can also do the graphical analysis there. You can print and display the data in the way you may need to, you want to use it. And in addition, UI5 elements can actually be used under other applications, and you can simply also integrate other applications in your other elements from other applications into your UI5 applications. So that is possible. And yeah, and also one more thing. So why we actually talk about UI5 and scope of SAP Analytics Cloud. So first of all, it is possible to use UI5 elements in SAP Analytics Cloud. Maybe we can take a look on such options. Most likely that will be during the next session. And yeah, but in general, also what if you work on the front end, then it is also possible that you may need to develop some UI5 applications, and in such cases the knowledge may be needed. But again, UI5, that is not a separate SAP system. That's just a framework which allows us to develop a user-friendly interface and then to work with data there. Yeah, so for example, from my company experience, we have the so-called CAT system. So that's for those who know SAP. These are for the human resource management. We have this CATS transaction, so for enterprise resource planning, and CATS report, and then we can actually so for all the employees, they should fill the working hours there. Again, that's mostly means that like I'm working, let's say, normally 8 hours per day. Then I have the projects. For each project I have the network there, and then basically for each activity I have the network, and then I can register the hours there. So normally we did it in using in SAP GUI, but so starting last year we developed a UI5 application where we can do it in more user-friendly way. Plus, in addition, we have some features related to some data-related features where we can also display some display the data, basically visualize the data, and also build some reports there based on the statistics of the working hours the colleagues have. So yeah, that was the need. Okay, if you have any questions, you can ask. But again, this application simply fetches the data from SAP systems. The application itself is not the separate system. Okay, so a few more things there. Yeah, so as I said, you can use custom widgets in SAP Analytics Cloud, and in fact some of these widgets may be based on UI5 elements. We will take a look on this in different not different, but most likely during the next session. So yeah, regarding the custom widgets, we will talk about them a little bit later. But first of all, so just another topic where which is more closer to, yeah, maybe we'll not have a second break, we'll just maybe finish earlier. In SAP Analytics Cloud, it is possible to build analytic applications, and these are also the web applications, and there you also need JavaScript code. We'll have some examples, I'm sure if today or next time. But yeah, so what is analytic application in SAP Analytics Cloud? So that is the actual application which presents the data in various formats. So here you can simply define the application with different elements, different layouts, tables, and then based on these, based on the data, then you can represent it in a various way. So there you can develop, some dashboards, show some static numbers, and develop highly customized applications. So they can contain many options for browsing and navigating data, and you can basically develop wherever you want. And so, again, as you know, in web development, we have such tools like HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. You are practically unlimited from the visualization point of view. Yeah, of course, you need the data to be taken from somewhere, but from the visualization point of view, you have practically unlimited options there. Yeah, so something similar is with analytic application. Yeah, and the first thing is SAP Analytics Cloud Designer, so that it enables analytics application designers to create centrally analytic content. Yeah, so you can develop the dashboards there to define the planning and also the smart applications. So in fact, there's dedicated design environment in SAP Cloud where you can create such application, and it includes, first of all, the defining of data model. So you need to define a data model, then so there's the laying on the screen, configure it widgets, and wiring it all up with the help of custom scripts. So I guess we can now, I can now show you what we can do. So let me log in into my Analytics Cloud. So here it is. Sorry, that is my personal account. Let me log in. And yeah, so there's my SAP Analytics Cloud. And yeah, so previously I showed you how can we load the data model here. It's not important, but it's nothing to do. So we can develop analytics application. But before we can develop there, we need to build the model. We need to build the model, and the model can be built just manually. When I define it, we can use live data model, the data source, and simply would be that we have Excel file. So for example, what we can do, let's take just any data file. So for example, I can open the data file where I have RQS. So just to the dividends for the stock. So here I have some records, and I have the amount of dividends. Yeah, so I have the data. And basically, this data is about the dividends paid per share of the stock. And yeah, so here I can load this file similar way as we did before. So let me open this file. Here we go. And from here, now you will see the similar view we seen last time. So here I have the data file. So and here I actually have the data, and I have the model. So what can I do here? What can I do here? Here I can do some data definitions. I can create calculated columns. That means that I add another column, then I do some calculation there. So if needed, I can transpose the data and so on. But the first thing what you need to do is, of course, to define the measures. So here I have the type. Yeah. So the type of the column. So here I have data. I can define data format I use. So yeah, sometimes when you load the data from the file, you may see the situation when the data is determined incorrectly. Yeah, so you have the date, but in fact it is determined as something else. So that means that you should have the precise format, then get the right data there. And yeah, and then for the actual data, yeah, you can simply use generic, but yeah, you can use measure. You can use measure, and yeah, then this will be the result. So then I can press create model. If you want, you can do some modifications there. And then I can create the model, so I can provide the path where my model will be stored, so that I can say this is distribution test. And now the model to be created. Yeah. Okay, so now I have this model, and I can now check how it looks like. Yeah, simply as you've seen, it is located in the files, so it has its own path. So the path would be, yeah, the public, I define it. So here I have my data model, so I can open it and see how it looks like. Yeah, so it has such visualizer. So I have the account which is actually taken as the main data. In my case, these are the this is the amount of dividends paid, and here I have the data there. So if I want, I can add custom properties. One thing what I can do, for example, I can add the variables. So it usually means that when you use this data in the application, you may need to fill these variables. And so there will be the variables which then can be accessed from the application. And we will not use them today, but most likely next time we will use them. So yeah, here we have our data model with actually also the data there. And what can we do? After that, we can go to the analytic applications, and from here we can create new application. So and here I have Canvas, so this is the main view I have, and from here I can, let's say, enter the table. I mean, my data maybe is not the best one to be displayed, but so just here I will explain the main concept then there. And yeah, so this is my model. And now the data table with the data will be displayed here. Yeah, so I need to do some modifications, so maybe I'll do it in the way that I will have the rows which will be, I will delete the columns there, and then I will create in the way that the rows be the account, yeah, which is actually the dividend rate per share, and then the columns would be the dates. And so ex dividend day, payment day, and the record day. And I guess I need to remove the filter. No, hold on, it should be done vice versa. Sorry, it should be done vice versa. So we should add the rows, would be the dates, and then the column would be the account, which is the actual measure we have there. So I don't need the filter. And so from here I can, for example, expand the data, and here I actually have the filtering there. So then for each year I have the, say that I select the payment day, and this is my actual dividend for this particular date. Yeah, so now I can save this application. Okay, now I can also run this application. And here I will, at this point, it will just only show me the table with the data. So nothing special what I can do here. So I can access the corresponding X date and then get the dividend amount. Maybe I don't need all the three columns there. So maybe, I can I can maybe select only one. So just to not make it confusing, let it be xdate. So what you maybe remove other columns also to make it easier then. Yeah, so that would be more simple. Yeah, so just to save, you need to press Ctrl S. And you will save. Then the application will be saved. Then you can run it. And basically see what happens then. Okay, so here I can navigate to the entries. Then I have this entry. So yeah, this is the application. We will maybe work with different visualization a little bit later. But what you can actually do, we can create some scripting. Yeah. So for example, let's say that what can we do? So first of all, let's create the button. For example, we can create. Yeah. So I go to insert. And from here I can insert different elements. So let's say I want to enter the button. So I can define the position of the button. Okay. So I can move it. Let's say I want to move it here. And then this would be just, let's make something really simple. Let's say height table. This one, the text would be height table. Yeah, so the name, you should normally define that that's the button, just to then simply distinguish it. And yeah, and for this button I can add the script, and basically all the scripts here in SAP Analytics Cloud Analytic application are in JavaScript, with some additions. That, for example, there is no such methods like numbers. Number. Moment. Okay, don't have parse float. Again. So, for example, to have such methods like parse float to simply get the, for example, number from integer, then you need to use convert tools. And from convert tools, you can call the methods which can parse, for example, the string to integer, or string to number, also number to string, and so on. But yeah, so let's simply hide them. So here again I have JavaScript code I can write, and so from here I can access any object I have here, any variable. At this point I don't have any variables, but I have the object. So let's say I can access the table. So I can access the table, then I can access this table as the object. So from here I can call then the method, and then the method would be, so since I want to make it, since I want to hide it, I can set visible true, or set visible false. And this will simply hide this table. Yeah, so I have the button, and I have on-click event. Yeah, actually you can see what are the events available. In this case, we have only 2 events available: on click and on long press. Yeah. So then let's say that on click we will make this button, make this table invisible. So just as a simple code, what we can do here, and then I can refresh the application. And my table is loading, so if I press hide table, I can see that the table disappears. In addition, what I can do, maybe let's say if I have long press, then long press will make the table visible. So then let's go back to the table, and let's here set visible. And well, in this case, we'll set it visible, so it means that this will be true. Okay. So again, I need to save, and then let's try what we have here. hide table, I will hide it, then I will press long press. Yes, that is. Oh, okay, maybe that's different event. No, okay, then maybe we'll do it. Okay, I guess there are two events, maybe both simultaneous. So maybe okay, then I can do it a little bit differently. I can then do the check. So then I check if table 1 is visible, then I'll make it invisible. And yeah, for some reasons here I need to use the brackets even for one line of code, and then I can define else, and then under else I can set visible false or true. Okay, so let's refresh. Then if I hide table, it will become invisible, and then if I press it again, it will be visible. So what else can we do? Let's we can also access this hide table button. So we can access this hide table button, and then I can also change the text, for example, and then I can write display. And it will be display table. So and if I make the table visible, then I need to revert the previous text. So that would be hide table. So make it 40. Okay, so let's refresh. And let's hide, and then you can see that the button will change the table will change the state. So one more thing, what we can do and what is helpful at the beginning and also during the development here. So again, I really like using inspect element in lots of different cases, especially when I deal with SAP applications. If it's UI5 application or just any application it is, I can use console log to then display me some things to basically just see what's going on, like as the debugger. I can use console as the debugger, and then okay, let's maybe create one more button, and here I will, using this button, I will hold on, just move, not this one, sorry, okay, here, on, sorry, okay, here we go, okay, here I can use the button, yeah, so the button name would be show info in log, show data info in log, and I need to expand it a little bit so to not forget to save. And from here I can also edit scripts, press on click, and what I want to do from here, I want to maybe for the developer purpose I can show some elements in log. So for example, I have my table, and I want to get the data from there. So that will be get data source. So this, yes, I can print data source as well. So let's save. So that'll be console log. And let's refresh it here. Yeah, so I just do not make it easier for me. I can clear all the consolidated no need, and yeah, from here, okay, it simply shows it as a string. Yeah, so maybe just to make it more interesting, I will get the result set from the data. Now it should be more interesting for us. Okay, so the plugin a little bit. Yeah. So and now what basically happens there? Here before I start any development, so just without using debugger, I can show the element stock. So in this case, I see that I have this table, and I can just simply check what the elements are returning. So in this case, I have the table, I have the data source, and I have the result set. So in this case, what I can simply check what happens there, and in addition, I can check what this method returns. So in this case, it returns all the 7 rows I have currently displayed here. Yeah, so I have the arrays of 7 rows. And what I have, let's say I take the first row. So here I have the data, I have measured dimension, and here I actually have the result of the first row. So that's the description dividend, so that's the measured dimension. So remember, we defined dividends per share as the measure of our data. So we have this description there. We have the formatted value, which is the actual value. The value is described is written as string. So to work with it as with the number value, you would need to parse it to convert it and parse it to a number. Yeah. And after that you can work with it as with the number. So this is the first one. Yeah, so I can check the measure. So the measure, that's the actual value there. Yeah, the description of the value. Then then I can check also X date. So this just simply takes the first one. Yeah. Okay, that's all. That's the first row. It takes, and so X date is all in this case. Just shows it as all. Then the next one would be the next one. The third one is 2017. So that is this row. So here's description. Here is the IDs that we not really needed. And okay, that's broken. Something. Yeah, so we have X date, and here we have the value. The value is taken out from here as the formatted value. Yeah. So that's about this case. So yeah, using console log, we can simply display all the objects available for us in runtime here. Okay, and basically here we can do lots of different things. Okay, maybe let's quickly go back to the presentation. So you can, using these applications, you can complete we can achieve complete integration, faster iterations, and also tailored experience. But yeah, so what this session, what I want to mention is what are the advantages for custom SAP Analytics Cloud applications comparing to the stories. Yeah, we have not talked about the stories yet. We'll do it in the next sessions. And but yeah, so what's the difference? First of all, yeah, so we have stories which are considered as the default generic solution for SAP Analytics Cloud. So there we have, so that's the actual service provided by SAP, which works, which is quite trusted. We can use it. However, it has customization limits. So what does it mean? It means that, and this is for not only SAP Analytics Cloud, but in other environments, it works the same way, that we have some kind of default program, default application defined, and then it is defined again by SAP. SAP developed it, and we have no really options for the customizations there. So again, it has the layout, it has all the buttons defined. However, there may be the cases, and usually we have such cases when we need to develop everything by ourselves. Yeah, so just develop as we want, not as SAP developed for us, but as we want. And in this case, that's why we need analytic applications. Yeah, and there we can use the models what we have in our SAP Analytics Cloud. Plus, we can use these models to define some kind of layouts, some logic, and can also define the behavior using the scripts. And this is where we have JavaScript. This is where we use JavaScript in SAP Analytics Cloud to define these applications. And of course, at the end, we make them more flexible. We'll have more examples during the next sessions. So most likely we will spend next sessions going through some practical examples, most likely. And we have only 2 sessions. We'll have only 2 sessions left there, so we will then go through the practical examples. But yeah, again, using analytic application, you can achieve more flexibility of what you want to, with what you want to, what you can create to achieve what you want. Yeah, so there are some basic steps. We will take a look on more examples next time. Yeah, so this is just something what we can take a look on just initially. You can use the access I provided to you, so you can try to create maybe something similar also to then maybe also to go through and define something by yourself. Yeah, you can. Yeah, regarding the variables, maybe we will cover them next time, but you can add maybe also some different elements and then use them in your application. But we will go through them next time with more examples. Do you have any questions? Okay, then if there is no questions, then I suggest you to try it by yourself. And I hope that your access is still in place. Just in case you have some troubles accessing the credentials I shared with you last time, please let me know. And then, okay, I guess we can finish the session today. So thank you very much for your attention, and then meet you next Friday. We will have more practical examples there. And yeah, so have a nice weekend ahead. Have a nice week, and then meet you all in 1 week. Bye.